Mass Media Manipulation Terms, Part 2, Selective Exposure. Okay, so if you are not a subscriber of this channel and you really want to get the textbook definition and explanation, a good explanation of the mainstream term, I advise you to watch this video. There's a link down below on this slide and I'll put it in the description. This will help you in school. But if you are a subscriber to my channel, I'm going to give you my version of it because we don't do mainstream on this channel. We do Jonathan Lippy's perspective here, the flip side of the coin. Let's start with the mainstream selective exposure definition. Selective exposure is a theory within the practice of psychology, often used in media and communications research, that historically refers to individuals' tendency to favor information which reinforces their pre-existing views while avoiding contradictory information. So that first definition blames the viewer. Let's see another definition. Selective exposure has also been known and defined as congeniality bias or confirmation bias in various texts throughout the years. Right, so confirmation bias, congeniality bias, I could roll with those. So while the definitions presented are true, I believe they are only part of the story because both of these are still blaming the viewer. But I ask, are we conditioned to only seek and favor information that reinforces our perspective of reality? Or was this behavior engineered into us? Think of how religious people and politically one-sided people only view information from their trusted sources. I think the definition being offered here for selective exposure or congeniality bias is also the definition for biased message processing. So all of these definitions are placing the blame on the viewer for only wanting to consume information that reinforces their version of reality. And people do this, and I do experience this, but it doesn't explain the origin of why they want to reinforce their version of reality. Because I think that's part of society. We all condition each other, police each other, and demand that we conform. And people have such a desire to belong that they want to learn the rules of the clique, of the tribe, and they can't balance alternative thoughts because sometimes they may let an alternative thought in and then get barked at by the rest of the club. With many of the mass media definitions I've looked at, the ones that I consider are manipulative terms, instead of them blaming media, instead of the definitions blaming the media for creating the problem, they blame the viewer. And they use the excuse that the media is simply offering the viewer what the viewer demands. They're supplying the demand. It's an easy way out of all things. So watch how they constantly place the blame on the viewer. I typed in selective exposure. These were some of the images that came up. It's not denial. I'm just very selective about the reality I accept. And then they got this picture of people putting the blinders on. Now, this picture of people putting the blinders on, we'll get to that because it's not the people putting the blinders on themselves, which is what you're going to find out. A consumer's selective exposure. Exposure to over 250 advertisement messages per day. Notices only 11 to 20 ads. How dare they? How dare they not watch and believe all 250 advertisement messages per day? And I guess this is just made to create the excuse to when they sell their advertisements and they're ineffective, well, it's the people's fault. See, again, it's never their fault. It's always the viewer's fault. It's never the media's fault for writing crummy ads or for improperly targeting an audience. I mean, why would a female viewer be interested in a male-only topic and vice versa? They did the poor targeted advertising. They still blame the viewer. All right, so my definition. The media, who work for the gatekeepers, selectively expose you to certain information that they want you to see and gatekeep out all the information they do not want you to see. Not only do they not want you to see it, they go out of their way to ensure that certain concepts never even cross your mind or ever get brought up.
And what you're seeing here is a mirage.
Ideas such as abundance are removed and the concept of scarcity is constantly reinforced. When we were in class, the instructor would say, What is our agenda as the news media? And the class would respond, our agenda as the news media is to advance the agenda of the gatekeepers. And the instructor would say, and who are the gatekeepers? And we would say, those who set the agenda. They selectively expose you to certain information and prevent other information from ever reaching your eyes or ears. You are shown a limited reality. The rest is withheld. It's part of the reason you reject new information. You get conditioned into a repetitive reality. Repeated, conditioned information. There are something like 26 storylines that forever get repeated over and over again. The radio stations play the same 10 songs over and over again. These are the new leads. These are the Glengarry leads. And to you, they're gold. But you don't get them. Why? Because to give them to you would be like throwing them away. They're for closers. Do they talk about any of this on TV? And I just jotted some of these things down real quick and, maybe. So let's see. You might not need to eat food anymore. We haven't need to use oil for 100 years. Water-powered cars were created and black-shelved. Are there tons and tons of channels about renewable energy, free energy, homemade energy, alternative energy? Nope. But if you take a look around you, you look at the weather, you look at the photosynthesis, the sun, the waves, all of the energy that's produced naturally by the environment. It's nonstop perpetual motion, nonstop energy in so many forms. And we're told the only way to get it is through petroleum. Are there channels about how to break free from the matrix? No. Besides the financial reporting channels like CNBC, are there any personal finance channels? Did they ever show how to download an MP3 on television? If you were from the era when people actually did download MP3s from things like Napster, Scour, Morpheus, LimeWire, Kazaa, or FTP servers, did it blow you away when the iTunes environment came out, where they selectively exposed you to an idea that the only way to acquire MP3s is through the iTunes store, and the only way to get them on there is to sync it through iTunes? That the concept of bringing an own individual MP3 to transfer that into your iPod never crosses anybody's mind, and it's never told. If you go even further back to when AOL and MSN were the ways you got online, and I guess Prodigy was out and there was one other, but AOL and MSN were the big two. And they had their own browsers that attempted to lock you within the MSN or AOL universe. The idea of minimizing their browser and launching Internet Explorer or Netscape didn't occur to me until I did it by accident. And then I walked around and I saw how everybody else interacted with the internet, and they all stayed locked in the world of AOL. The concept of minimizing the AOL browser, launching your own browser, keying in your own address that you want to visit instead of being portalized and only clicking the things advertised to you in their little portal network, never occurred to people. Selective exposure. What is repeated over and over and over on all channels? Consumerism, weddings, expensive, elaborate weddings, the rings, reproduction, marry and reproduce, talent competitions in reality TV, police shows catching criminals, child-parent conflicts, judge shows, cooking shows, to reinforce behavior and in some cases create new ones. So are there any of the following on television? Tech TV channels, computer enthusiast channels, video gaming channels, how to repair everything you pay people to repair, how to learn anything that you pay people to learn, math channels, learn language channels, stuff that advances your abilities, skills, makes you smarter, more employable, wealthier, more free, independent? None. Think of all the channels historically that have been on your cable box. There was a period of time where there was like educational access, and some local teacher might have been teaching on a really poorly produced live broadcast feed that was not of the standard of the broadcast networks. It was they called it public access. I don't know if that goes on anymore, but you had that, but I don't even see that anymore. All those stations, there's no education station. How is there no demand for an education station? And I'm not even talking about present day, because present day, who even watches TV nowadays? Everything's through the internet, and obviously we do have them. We have YouTube, Khan Academy, and all the others. You could get your education now, but I'm speaking more of like the 90s and the early 2000s. Total side note, they try to sell you a pet rock, an invisible dog, and teach you that there's more than two genders and see if you'll believe it. And the point also is, just in case you still think TV is your friend, I want you to know that it's not, and it's just wasting your life. So what do they expose you to? Conditioned behaviors, bad decision-making behavior, I guess I stopped making notes here. So exposure, types of exposure, selective exposure. The highly selective nature of consumer exposure is a major concern for marketers, since failure to gain exposure results in lost communication and sales opportunities. And that takes me to another term, another phrase we used to say in class. The instructor would say, "Do we sell a television program to the audience?" And the class would say, "No, we sell an audience share to the advertiser." I'm going to say that again. No, we sell an audience share to the advertiser. And even if that one doesn't throw you off, the reality then becomes the television content is designed to generate the consumer purchasing pattern that the advertiser wants to reinforce or engineer into the behavior. Voluntary exposure. Although consumers often, again, they're blaming the consumers. Although consumers often avoid commercials and other marketing stimuli, sometimes they actively seek them out for various reasons, including purchase goals, entertainment, and information. Now, as I read this, I almost feel like this is speaking it into existence. So it's saying, yeah, people don't want to see commercials. They do whatever they can to stay the heck away from them. But then it's like they want to engineer this idea, but sometimes they actively seek them out for various reasons, including purchase goals, entertainment, and information. I mean, yeah, and I had said this a long time ago. They conditioned society to watch the Super Bowl ads by making it seem popular to watch the Super Bowl ads, so then they could turn around and sell the Super Bowl ads for a higher price. I mean, that's just business. But at the same time, it's wasting your time, tricking you into watching ads, and you didn't even realize it. I'll read this one, more of the official definition from Wikipedia, because it has the term that everybody loves, cognitive dissonance. That's such a buzzword. Everybody feels so smart saying cognitive dissonance. So according to the historical use of the term, people tend to select specific aspects of exposed information which they incorporate into their mindset. These selections are made based on their perspectives, beliefs, attitudes, and decisions. People can mentally dissect the information they are exposed to and select favorable evidence while ignoring the unfavorable. The foundation of this theory is rooted in the cognitive dissonance theory, which asserts that when individuals are confronted with contrasting ideas, certain mental defense mechanisms are activated to produce harmony between new ideas and pre-existing beliefs, which results in cognitive equilibrium. Cognitive equilibrium, which is defined as a state of balance between a person's mental representation of the world and his or her environment, is crucial to understanding selective exposure theory. According to Jean Piaget, when a mismatch occurs, people find it to be inherently dissatisfying. Now, the duality of everything, the polarization, was intentionally done by the media. So they're the ones creating the cognitive dissonance. It's not people. The line there that people can mentally dissect the information they are exposed to and select favorable evidence. I mean, yeah, well, that's true, but it's not, especially if they haven't been trained because they've been selectively exposed to slanted information their whole life. How could they possibly come to it on their own? There was this one guy that when he said that the media takes blame for stuff, he arrogantly said and like fired back, you know, when crisis happens, people turn to the media no matter what they say. They may say they don't like the media, but as soon as something happens, they turn to us. They turn to us to define to them what happened, to explain it. All right, these other ones don't really matter that much. Constantly trying to deny they program reality. Clapper's selective exposure. In the early 1960s, Columbia University researcher Joseph Clapper asserted in his book The Effects of Mass Communication that audiences were not passive targets of political and Let me pause here. So this book, The Effects of Mass Communication, is what shifted the blame off of the media onto the viewer. As you watch how he shifts the blame here. So in his book, The Effects of Mass Communication, he asserts that audiences were not passive targets of political and commercial propaganda from mass media, but that mass media reinforces previously held convictions. Yeah, right. It's not their fault. It's never their fault. They always shift the blame. Throughout the book, he argued that the media has a small amount of power to influence people, and most of the time, it just reinforces our pre-existing attitudes and beliefs. Dude, do you believe that? You believe that the media has what do you call it? Minimal power? Has a small amount of power to influence people. Yeah. You believe? Okay. This is why I don't cite authoritative sources, because they push this nonsense. He argued that the media effects of relaying or spreading new public messages or ideas were minimal because there is a wide variety of ways in which individuals filter such content, which I guess that's what they're using selective exposure for. They're saying, oh no, people are selectively expose themselves to what they want to consume, so we can't be held accountable for anything because they're filtering it. Selective exposure, cognitive dissonance. Due to this tendency, Clapper argued that media content must be able to ignite some type of cognitive activity in an individual in order to communicate its message. So he's saying, because people selectively expose, we need to ignite and take control of the cognitive capabilities of the mind for our message to have an impact, because people just won't pay attention. So we need to play with people's minds and be given the opportunity to do so. Not less mind control, more mind control. So he's saying that since people will reject the information, the media content must be able to ignite some type of cognitive activity in an individual in order to communicate its message. So it's like, you got to give us permission to use forms of mind control because people reject it. Now, I've highlighted this because it shows that people prior to the media originally had the right idea, but this guy explained away everything and completely brainwashed him. So watch this. Prior to Clapper's research, the prevailing opinion was that mass media had a substantial power to sway individual opinion, and that audiences were passive consumers of prevailing media propaganda, which is true. However, by the time of the release of The Effects of Mass Communication, many studies led to a conclusion that many specifically targeted messages were completely ineffective. Clapper's research showed that individuals gravitated towards media messages that bolstered previously held convictions that were set by peer groups, societal influences, and family structures, and that the accession of these messages over time did not change when presented with more recent media influence. So I guess therefore they had to break up families and break up peer groups so that they can control the message, because people are doing too much of their own thinking, or thinking outside of our control is happening. This is what they do. They create these studies and then they make up the results that they want in order to advance the cloaking that they're doing. Clapper noted from the review of research in the social science that given the abundance of content within the mass media, audiences were selective to the types of programming that they consumed. They were selective to the types of programming that they consumed. Meaning they consumed what they wanted. We just gave them what they wanted. You could drink whatever you want so long as it's Coke or Pepsi. You can vote for whoever you'd like. Just make sure it's one of our candidates. And let's see. Adults would patronize media that was appropriate for their demographics, and children would eschew media that was boring to them. So individuals would either accept or reject a mass media message based upon internal filters that were innate to that person. So again, it's the viewer's fault. But if they control all the children's programming and all the adult programming, it's still their programming. So my objectives with this video here was to, one, show you how the media gives you their definition, the one that they want you to believe. And in turn, what it does is cover up the actual meaning of it. And I'm training you to see the doublespeak of it. So they want you to believe selective exposure is your fault. I'm telling you, they're selectively exposing you to certain things. And as you saw on that highlighted slide, the people originally knew what the media was up to, but then they created their study, and that did away with what the people believed and replaced it with what they wanted the reality, what they wanted you to believe the reality was. Another concept is to learn how to read through these definitions. Just because they speak so polished and so matter-of-factly doesn't mean that they're right, doesn't mean that they're not trying to persuade or manipulate the living daylights out of you. At the end of the article on Wikipedia, we have a see also, attitude, polarization, communal reinforcement, echo chamber, it's one of my favorite terms, filter bubble, group polarization, low information rationality, media consumption, reinforcement theory, Russell's teapot, solipsism, and truthiness. Echo chamber. Man, those echo chambers. All I want to do is I troll echo chambers because I think what I despise more than the media are people putting themselves in siloed echo chambers where they don't want to hear no evil, see no evil, and they got their head in the sand like ostriches. Yeah, I'm out to mess it up for them. But yeah, and most of the media is really just acting on whoever's bankrolling them to advance whatever agenda. So it's inaccurate to specifically blame the media because they're all owned by somebody and they're just the front. Regardless of what they say or how they blame you, the viewer, for it, they create and shape behavior. A lot of the stuff that's happened in the past 10 years, these behaviors were manufactured out of thin air. The way people are now aren't the way they used to be. They always love to go back on we're just in it to make money. Because making money is just business. But they're manipulating minds. And they're saying they're not doing it. That's selective exposure. I hope you enjoyed this media manipulation term, part 2. Let me know if you like this series. And if you have some examples of your own, feel free to put them in the comments. See you next time.